The fluorescent lights in the conference room buzzed with their usual irritating hum as I watched Derek Thornton pace behind the mahogany table like a predator circling prey. His expensive Italian suit couldn't hide the fact that he'd only been at Nexus Tech for 8 months, parachuted in as vice president of innovation after our previous leadership retired. What he lacked in technical knowledge he made up for in corporate buzzwords and an uncanny ability to take credit for other people's work. I sat in my usual chair, the one I'd occupied for the past 12 years, watching him flip through printouts of our quarterly performance metrics. Around the table my colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Jamie from quality assurance kept checking her phone, while Marcus from development traced patterns on his notepad with obvious anxiety. Our flagship product, NexusFlow, continues to drive 73% of company revenue, Derek announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who'd never written a line of code in his life. But innovation has stagnated. We're not pushing boundaries anymore. I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was calculating how many all-nighters I'd pulled over the past decade perfecting NexusFlow's core algorithms. The irony wasn't lost on me that Derek was criticizing lack of innovation while discussing a product that had revolutionized supply chain management for Fortune 500 companies worldwide. Alex, Derek's voice cut through my thoughts and I looked up to find his cold gray eyes focused on me. Your team's latest proposals are frankly disappointing. The encryption module updates you submitted last month were basic at best. I chose my words carefully. The encryption improvements increase security efficiency by 34% while reducing processing overhead. Our beta clients have reported significant performance gains. Performance gains, Derek repeated with a dismissive laugh. We're not running a maintenance shop, Alex. We need breakthrough innovations, not incremental improvements. The unfairness of it stung, but I'd learned to mask my reactions over the years. Derek had been systematically undermining my contributions since his arrival, taking credit for my innovations in board meetings while simultaneously criticizing my work in front of the team. What he didn't know, what nobody in this room knew, was that I held the foundational patents for the algorithms that made NexusFlow possible. 8 years ago, during my own time and using my personal resources, I'd developed the core mathematical models that became NexusFlow's backbone. The patent applications had been filed under my name through a small intellectual property firm I'd engaged privately. When Nexus Tech needed those algorithms for their new product, I'd quietly licensed them to the company through a shell corporation, keeping my ownership anonymous to avoid workplace complications. The licensing agreement had seemed like a win-win at the time. Nexus got cutting-edge technology and I received substantial royalty payments while maintaining my day job. Now, watching Derek pontificate about innovation while benefiting from my undisclosed intellectual property, that decision felt prophetic. Moving forward, Derek continued, we need to restructure our development priorities. Fresh perspectives, bold thinking. Some of our senior team members have become too comfortable, too set in their ways. Jamie glanced at me nervously. We both knew where this was heading. Which brings me to a difficult decision, Derek said, his tone shifting to mock solemnity. Alex, your contract is being terminated, effective immediately. The words hit the room like a physical force. Marcus's pen clattered to the table and I heard Jamie's sharp intake of breath. But what struck me most was Derek's expression. Not regret or professional courtesy, but barely concealed satisfaction. I'm sorry. I kept my voice level though my heart was racing. Your ideas are stale, Derek announced, projecting his voice as if he were addressing shareholders rather than a small conference room. 12 years is a long time in tech. We need fresh talent, people who can think outside the box instead of relying on outdated methodologies. The room fell silent except for the persistent buzzing of those fluorescent lights. I looked around at my colleagues. People I'd mentored, collaborated with, celebrated successes alongside for over a decade. Their faces showed a mixture of shock and sympathy, but also the careful neutrality of people protecting their own positions. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks severance, Derek continued, already shuffling his papers as if my termination were just another agenda item. HR will handle the exit paperwork. I'll need your company laptop and access cards before you leave today. I stood slowly, my legs steadier than I'd expected. I understand. Good, Derek said without looking up. Marcus, I want you to take over Alex's current projects. We'll backfill the position with someone more aligned with our innovation goals. As the meeting dissolved around me, I walked back to my desk in the open office area. The familiar space looked different now. The photos of company retreats, the awards for technical excellence, the coffee-stained notepad where I'd sketched out breakthrough solutions. All of it suddenly felt like artifacts from someone else's life. I opened my desk drawers methodically, separating personal items from company property. My colleagues kept glancing over with expressions of disbelief and sympathy, but nobody approached. Corporate layoffs created their own social dynamics, and proximity to the terminated was often seen as contagious. 20 minutes later, I had packed everything into a small cardboard box. My company laptop sat on the desk surface next to my access badge and parking card, the tools of 12 years of dedicated service reduced to returnable assets. Derek appeared at my cubicle, flanked by Janet from HR. "All set?" he asked with manufactured professionalism. I handed over the laptop and cards without comment. "Your final paycheck will be deposited Friday," Janet said gently. She'd been with the company longer than Derek and clearly felt uncomfortable with the situation. "If you need a reference letter for future opportunities, please don't hesitate to reach out." Derek's smile was cold. "I'm sure Alex will land on his feet. The market always needs reliable maintenance programmers." The insult was deliberate and public. Several nearby colleagues had stopped working to witness my departure, and Derek wanted to ensure they understood that innovation belonged to new leadership, not legacy employees. I picked up my box and walked toward the elevator, my footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet office. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of the Nexus Tech logo on the wall, the company I'd helped build now moving forward without me. In my car, I sat in the parking lot for several minutes, processing what had just happened. The initial shock was giving way to something else. Not anger exactly, but a calculating clarity I hadn't felt in years. Derek had made a critical error in judgment, one that would become apparent very soon. I pulled out my personal phone and dialed a familiar number. "Henderson Patents and Licensing," the receptionist answered. "This is Alex Chin. I need to speak with Robert Henderson about the NexusFlow licensing agreement." Robert had handled my patent portfolio for years, managing the complex web of licensing deals that generated significant passive income while keeping my identity protected from potential workplace conflicts. He came on the line immediately. "Alex, good to hear from you. How can I help?" "I need to review the termination clauses in the Nexus Tech licensing agreement. Specifically, the sections dealing with employment status changes." There was a pause as Robert accessed my file. "Ah yes. Very thorough contract language. If your employment status with the licensee changes for any reason, you have the right to renegotiate or terminate the licensing agreement with 30 days' notice." "And current royalty status?" "Quite healthy. NexusFlow generated $847,000 in royalties for you last quarter alone. The product represents roughly 73% of Nexus Tech's total revenue according to their public filings." I smiled for the first time in days. "Robert, I want you to prepare a formal notice of license termination. Effective in 72 hours. Are you certain? That's a substantial income stream and..." "I'm certain. And Robert, I want the notice delivered to Derek Thornton personally." Over the next 3 days, I maintained my regular routine while quietly preparing for what was coming. I updated my resume, reached out to my professional network, and fielded several calls from former Nexus colleagues who'd heard about my termination through the office grapevine. "It's insane," Jamie told me over coffee Tuesday morning. "Derek's already assigned your projects to 3 different people. Nobody understands the core architecture like you did." "I'm sure they'll figure it out," I said, though internally I doubted that. The NexusFlow algorithms were elegantly complex, requiring deep understanding of both the mathematical principles and their practical implementation. Derek had fired the one person who truly understood how everything worked together. Wednesday morning, I was reviewing job listings when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Nexus Tech's main number. "Alex, thank God you answered." It was Marcus and he sounded panicked. "We have a major problem with NexusFlow. The core processing engine just stopped working completely." I kept my voice neutral. "Stopped working how?" "Everything. The authentication protocols, the optimization algorithms, the data processing modules. It's like someone flipped a switch. We're getting error messages about invalid licensing, but IT says all our software licenses are current. Through my home office window, I could see the morning joggers on the neighborhood trail, people starting their Wednesday routines with no idea that one of the tech industry's most successful products had just become unusable. Have you contacted technical support? I asked. That's just it. The error messages aren't pointing to any of our usual vendors. They reference something called Chin Algorithmic Solutions. Nobody here has ever heard of it. Chin Algorithmic Solutions was the shell company I'd established years ago to license my patents. The name had seemed clever at the time, though I'd never expected circumstances where its significance would become so obvious. I'm sure it's just a licensing glitch, I said. These things usually resolve themselves. Alex, listen. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. Derek is losing his mind. 3 major clients are already calling about service disruptions. If we can't fix this by end of business today, we're looking at massive contract penalties. After hanging up, I made myself a cup of coffee and waited. The call I was expecting came 47 minutes later. Alex. Derek's voice was strained, all his earlier arrogance replaced by barely controlled panic. We need to talk. Hello, Derek. How can I help you? This licensing issue with NexusFlow. We think it might be related to some of your old code. Could you come in today and take a look? I set down my coffee cup, savoring the moment. I'm not sure I understand. You said my ideas were stale and that you needed fresh talent. Look, we can work out the details later. Right now we need to get the system operational. Our clients are furious and the board is asking questions I can't answer. Derek, I'm no longer a Nexus Tech employee. You terminated my contract Monday. Surely your fresh talent can handle a simple licensing issue. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. What do you want? Derek finally asked, his voice tight. I want you to understand something, I said, allowing a trace of steel to enter my voice. NexusFlow isn't just built on algorithms I helped optimize. It's built on algorithms I created and own. Every core function, every processing module, every piece of mathematical logic that makes your flagship product work. I hold the patents. Another silence, this one even longer. That's impossible, Derek whispered. Chin Algorithmic Solutions, Derek. Check your licensing agreements. For 8 years, Nexus Tech has been paying royalties to use my intellectual property. As of this morning, that license has been revoked. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. The termination notice should have been delivered to your office about an hour ago, I continued. Probably sitting on your desk right now. The line went dead. 20 minutes later, Janet from HR called. Alex, could you please come in this afternoon? Derek would like to discuss some contract modifications. I arrived at Nexus Tech to find the office in controlled chaos. Several developers clustered around monitors displaying error messages, while others worked phones trying to reassure panicked clients. The energy was completely different from my last visit. Instead of routine productivity, there was an undertone of crisis barely held in check. Derek met me at the elevator, his expensive suit wrinkled and his usually perfect hair disheveled. We need to talk privately. In his office, he closed the door and leaned against it as if afraid I might escape. The licensing notice. Is this some kind of negotiating tactic? It's a business decision, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. When you terminated my employment, you triggered clauses in the licensing agreement that allowed me to reconsider our business relationship. Business relationship? Derek's voice cracked slightly. You worked here. You can't just own the patents to our main product. I can and do. I developed those algorithms on my own time using my own resources, then licensed them to Nexus Tech through my company. It was all perfectly legal and properly documented. Derek slumped into his chair, the fight draining out of him. What do you want? I want my job back, I said simply. Full reinstatement with an apology to the team for the misunderstanding about my termination. And the licensing? We can discuss new terms. More favorable to both parties, perhaps. Derek stared at me across his desk and I could see him working through the implications. Without NexusFlow, Nexus Tech would lose their primary revenue stream within weeks. The contracts, the client relationships, the company's entire market position. All of it depended on algorithms that existed at my discretion. The board will never approve bringing you back after such a public termination, he said weakly. I smiled. Then I guess you'll need to be creative in how you present it to them. I'm sure someone with your innovative thinking can find a solution. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. That afternoon, Derek announced to the team that there had been a strategic miscommunication about my employment status. The company was implementing a new consulting arrangement that would keep me involved in critical projects while allowing me to pursue additional opportunities. It was corporate speak for, "We desperately need him back but can't admit we made a mistake." The NexusFlow systems came back online that evening, and by the following week, things had returned to normal, with one significant difference. Derek's attitude toward me had shifted from condescending dismissal to wary respect. He still tried to take credit for innovations in board meetings, but he no longer questioned my technical decisions or dismissed my contributions. 6 months later, I negotiated a new licensing agreement that tripled my royalty rates and included guaranteed consultation fees. Derek had learned that innovation sometimes comes from unexpected sources, and that dismissing experienced talent can have consequences that extend far beyond hurt feelings. As for my colleagues, they never learned the full details of what had happened, but they understood that something fundamental had changed in the office dynamics. The lesson was clear. In the tech industry, the quiet person in the corner might be the one holding all the cards.